Welcome to the Smart Legacy Podcast, your resource for protecting assets and securing your future. Hosted by Stockton and Cant, join us as we cover essential estate planning and elder law topics, such as wills, trusts, and Medicaid planning. Stockton and Cant, your trusted attorney advisors in safeguarding what matters most. Welcome to another episode of the Smart Legacy Podcast. I'm your host, Glenn Stockton, managing attorney at Stockton and Cant, an estate planning and elder law firm in the Kansas City area. We have offices in Overland Park and Gardner. In my work with families, I've seen something again and again. The families who plan thoughtfully leave behind more than assets. They leave behind clarity, direction, and peace of mind. Because estate planning is not just about passing along valuables. It's about passing along your values, your priorities, your intentions, and your care for the people you love. This podcast is here to help you make thoughtful, informed decisions so your wishes are honored, your family is protected, and the people you love are guided by clarity instead of chaos. Today, we're talking about the role of a professional trustee and how families choose the right person or institution to carry out their wishes. I'm joined today in studio by Mike Sears. Mike is an attorney and the senior trust officer with BOK Financial in Overland Park, Kansas. I've known Mike for a lot of years and have long respected his work with families. He works closely with them in administering trust and carrying out the intentions behind estate plans every day. Mike, I'm glad to have you here. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
All right. So as we get going here, take a few moments before we dive into trust network and just maybe tell us a little bit about you and BOK Financial.
Well, so I, as you said, an attorney, grew up in central Kansas, went to Kansas State University for my undergrad, KU for law school, did a few years of insurance defense litigation after law school, did not like litigation, and then practiced as an estate planning attorney for about 8 years. And then after that, worked for a smaller trust company here in town for about 12 years, and I've been with BOK Financial for about 10 years now, a little over 10 years.
Okay. So in plain English, for our listeners, maybe tell us, what is the role of a trustee?
So a trustee manages the trust, and there's kind of two parts to that. When somebody initially dies, the trustee is going to come in, gather the assets, file final tax return, potentially file an estate tax return, gather those assets, manage them, see what the trust says, and then either distribute those out to the beneficiaries or hold those in trust that continue for the beneficiaries. And the second piece of that would be for those ongoing trusts. If mom and dad have left a trust for their children or for their child, the professional trustee or any trustee manages those assets. So they invest the assets, or if it's real estate, they manage that, make distributions to the beneficiaries according to the terms of the trust, file tax returns, and just basically handle or manage those assets going forward.
How does that differ from the work of an executor? So how's a trustee different?
Well, a trustee deals with a trust, and an executor is going to deal with the probate estate, which is usually a will. And so an executor is going to be appointed in a will as opposed to the trust document. And the executor is going to be overseen by the court. So the executor provides accountings to the beneficiaries, but also to the court, and it's going to have the court or the judge approve all the stuff that they do.
So, you talked about the things and all the tax returns and managing the finances and that kind of thing. And, as I kind of said in the intro, and as I tell clients all the time, we're aiming to create clarity over chaos, right? And a lot of times when we leave these functions to people who this is not what they do, they don't understand this, because tax returns have to be filed, investments have to be managed, things have to be divided up, distributed. And I tell people, when we do good planning, it doesn't mean that there's nothing left to do. We still got things we have to do. It just should be much easier. So, that's like creating that clarity, but the trustee
Right.
is the one in charge of doing that. So when would it make sense for someone to look to a professional trustee like you and BOK Financial as versus looking to maybe a family member to serve in that role?
Well, of course, that's, you're asking the professional trustee, when should you use me? And I would say most of the time. So the role of the trustee is interesting and how it can affect the role within the family, right? So when I was in practice and still today, clients will come to me and say, hey, I'm thinking of updating my trust. Which of my kids should I name as the trustee? And my kind of half serious, half joke answer is, which one do you like the least? Because it's a thankless job. It's a lot of work. The kids typically don't know what they're supposed to do. They don't know the tax rules. They don't know the trust rules, what the fiduciary statutes say. And they've got their own life, right? They've got kids. They've got a job. They're busy. And now to pile this on top of them can really be difficult. And so I tell people, as a corporate trustee, we handle the investments, we handle the taxes, we do all of that stuff, but I'm really in the family harmony business. My job is to come in during a stressful time and make things easier for the family. I was talking to an attorney the other day, and he was dealing with a situation where dad had died, had left a trust, and named his daughter as the trustee, and she was a beneficiary, and his son was a beneficiary. So the trustee daughter was trustee for her brother's share. And he said immediately that stopped being a brother-sister relationship and became a brother-banker relationship. And it changes the relationship, it changes the dynamics, and oftentimes not for the better.
What are some of the common problems you do see when a family member is named to serve as that role as trustee?
A lot of it is that they just kind of don't know what to do. So sometimes they don't do anything, and that's a problem. And then so the siblings or the rest of the family is on them. Hey, you need to take care of this. Often they don't have the investment expertise, so they might not have the investments properly diversified. If the market goes down, maybe they don't have that handled. Tax situations can cause problems, and making distributions can be difficult. I tell people that if a beneficiary comes to me, I can kind of be the bad guy if I need to. I can tell somebody no, and I don't have to have Thanksgiving dinner with them, right? Whereas if the brother comes to the sister and says, hey, I need a new car, and the sister says, well, okay, but do you really need one with the leather seats? That just creates sometimes a bad family dynamic.
Right. Who are you to tell me
Right.
what to do with the money mom
right.
and dad left me?
Exactly.
We see that. In your view, are there situations where it still is appropriate to name a family member or an individual as a
For
trustee?
sure. It can work, usually in smaller, simpler, kind of cleaner estates where there's not a bunch of assets that we need to deal with. Often if it's come in, file a tax return, divide up a bank account or an investment account, and hand checks to your siblings, and it's not an ongoing thing, that can work okay. So there's times that it can work. But generally speaking, if it's an ongoing trust relationship, the more and more I say, better to have somebody else do that.
How does family dynamics, from your view, factor into that of whether you need a professional trustee or not?
Well, I think, and that's an interesting question, because if they ask, well, I'm thinking about naming one of my children or a family member as the trustee, what should I be looking for in that child? And the first thing I think is trust. Are you going to trust them to handle the situation appropriately? And they need to have some basic accounting and skills like that. But really, are they trustworthy to follow the rules that you've laid out in the trust document?
And I see helping people to trust all the time. I see the value of professional trustees. I'm a big believer in professional trustees. You bring a lot to the table. But there's a cost involved. So what is the typical fee structure, right? There's the cost.
That's the initial pushback that we get is I don't want to pay a fee, and we do charge a fee, right? So our typical fee is going to be a percentage of the assets under management, and so our fee schedule starts at the first $1 million. We're going to charge 1.25% of the assets under management, and that's an ongoing fee. So as we're managing these assets over the years, we charge that fee annually, and then it's going to scale down from there. I think we charge 1% on the next $2 million and 90 basis points on the next $2 million, and anything over $5 million, we're probably going to kind of negotiate a fee. So that's the big rub with the professional trustee. We're going to charge, in addition to that, full disclosure, if we have a tax return that we need to file, which we will every year, that's going to be another $750. So that's the rub with a professional trustee is we do charge a fee. But, if a family member steps in as the trustee, they're probably going to have to hire an attorney. Most attorneys don't work for free. So you're paying the attorney's hourly rate oftentimes for that. They're going to probably hire a CPA to prepare the tax return or to give them some advice. They're often going to hire an asset manager, portfolio manager. They're probably going to charge a percentage of the assets. And they've got time involved. And the family dynamics gets interesting when a family member says, oh, I'm the trustee of mom and dad's trust, but I'm going to charge a fee on top of the, whatever I'm supposed to get as a beneficiary. I'm going to charge a fee on this too. That the family really loves that. So when you add up all those fees, I feel like the cost of a corporate trustee is really pretty reasonable and sometimes less expensive financially than an individual trustee.
One of the things I find that the biggest motivator as to why people do estate planning is they do not want to be a burden. And they want this to be easy for their loved ones, whoever they leave behind, the kids or whoever it is. But often, if they can be burdened, if there's, things to do at death. So you guys are taking that burden. And the way I look at it, the kids or, their beneficiaries are keeping, 99% or pretty close to 99% of the money. And, you're charging 1%, but you're doing all the heavy lifting and doing things. So,
and if we're doing our job well from the investment standpoint, that's growing. Those assets are growing over time. So hopefully they're going to get the benefit of our investment expertise as well.
So how would you kind of counsel a family or an individual to determine whether those fees are worth it? How do you make that determination or help families make it?
That's it. There is some question about, in my mind, at what point do you need ongoing trusts for the kids, right? If you've got a married couple and they have $2 million, let's say, and they've got 4 kids, and the kids are adult, solid marriages, no addiction problems, no special needs concerns, just kind of solid all-American family. And the mom and dad say, well, when we die, we want this $2 million divided 4 ways, and we want it held in trust. So each child's going to get a $500,000 trust, which is a lot of money. But in the trust world, a $500,000 trust isn't that big, right? It's going to probably not generate enough income that they can just live on the income. So they're going to be continually asking for principal distributions. And at some point, and I don't know what that is it 300,000? Is it $500,000? Is it $1 million? that it's too small to have an ongoing trust for the kids, and so they maybe think about, well, it's just distributed out to them, let them enjoy it and go on their way. So at some point, I don't know if financially, economically, it makes sense for an ongoing trust with a corporate trustee.
And you've talked a little bit about this already, but what I talk about, the hidden costs and the hidden risks of not using a professional trustee, or at least in using the wrong trustee.
Mm-hmm.
And you probably have a arsenal of stories that you can tell where things have gone wrong. But what are some of those costs that you see that families incur because they didn't choose the right trustee? They put somebody in the wrong position.
Well, I think the real cost is, what does it do to the family relationships? And we've talked about that some. Fortunately, I don't have a lot of stories of situations where it's gone really bad, but those are out there. I remember a Kansas case that I was reading not too long ago where dad died and named mom and son as the co-trustees. And mom one day went to the bank and to get some money out of the trust, and the bank said, that money's all gone. And son had taken the money and gambled it away or done something with it as the trustee, and it was gone, right? So mom, maybe she can sue son. That's not a fun situation to begin with. But even if she wins and gets a judgment, if he's stolen that money and spent it all, how does she collect that judgment, right? You can't get blood out of a turnip. And so she's left with no trust, a broken relationship with her son, and no way to get compensated for that loss. A corporate trustee, we're examined, we're regulated, we've got auditors, so there's much less chance of something going wrong there. But if something does go wrong, we're insured, and there's going to be a mechanism to make the clients whole. If I blow a tax filing deadline and cause a problem, the bank's going to be able to make that whole.
As I'm counseling families on, what is the best plan for them and how to structure the plan, sometimes I see what in my mind are red flags to say, maybe we should look to a professional trustee and really push strong. And one of them is, because I've seen this happen so many times, and the scenario is, let's say, mom and dad, they've got their home, they've got their assets, they've got 2-3 kids, they're doing well, they've got a revocable trust, they're serving as trustee, dad dies, mom continues on. But then mom starts declining in health. One of the kids moves in to help take care of mom. The other kids don't always see it that way. Sometimes
Right.
they think, oh, they're taking advantage of the situation. And then mom has to move off to assisted living and nursing care. And one of the other children, who's not the one living there, has taken over as trustee. And mom's running low on money. And we need to get the home sold, or at least that's their perspective. We've
Right.
got one of the siblings now, one of the kids living in the home, and now we have a fight. We got it going on, and they've got to try to evict their sibling out of the home to get it sold. And I've just seen those kind of scenarios play out. So when I see, a child who's living in the home, or if they're answering the questions, the kids, they don't get along, they're estranged from one another, or those. So those are red flags we have. What would be some of the other red flags that you would say people should be on the look to say, look, if you've got this situation, it very much may be worth it to have a professional trustee, because I said the number one goal is I don't want to be a burden. That's the thing we hear. Number two, we don't want our loved ones arguing and fighting about things at our incapacity or passing. But if we don't set this up right, if we don't pay attention, we can't. So what would be some of those other red flags you see?
I think you've kind of nailed it. Just that wealth in general and difficult assets to divide. Personal property can sometimes be difficult. There's only one frying pan that Grandma used. I can divide $1 million 3 ways easy. I can't divide the frying pan 3 ways. So part of that's on you to plan and tell your clients, hey, you got to address this stuff up front and don't leave it for whatever trustee's going to have to deal with the fight that they know is coming over the personal property. I'll twist a little bit to situations where the corporate trustee has difficult time with some red flags for a corporate trustee, and that's often with a business owner client. And there it might be appropriate to have a co-trustee family member or business associate. I've had situations where somebody passes away and the individual owned, in one case it was a Mexican restaurant, and a Mexican restaurant was in the trust, and they came to us and said, hey, do you want to be trustee of this trust? I don't know anything about running a Mexican restaurant, right? I'm not, and the bank doesn't know anything about running a Mexican restaurant. So there's part of it that we can handle, but those other things for that ongoing business and operating business, it might be good to name a family member, or if you've got a key business person that can help run that, to be the trustee of those assets. We can be the trustee of the other assets and work together in situations like that. But sometimes family farm, we've got farm managers, so we can help with that. But farms, businesses can be kind of tricky for any trustee.
Yeah, so you're getting at something that we'll see from time to time where I tell clients, we can bifurcate trustee responsibility. I can trifurcate trustee responsibility. It makes sense. But again, it's back to don't overcomplicate things. Keep it simple. What would maybe be some other areas where you might bifurcate those trustee proceedings? Say, look, family members going to serve in this role, and we'll, as the corporate trustee, will serve over here in this role.
Well, I see it more where we've got a co-trustee potentially for, mom and dad pass away and leave assets for a minor child. And we might have a family member co-trustee who has got more of the personal relationship with that child and can kind of help the bank understand what that child's needs are, educational needs, things like that, that they're just going to have more day-to-day contact with that child, so they're going to be more familiar. So that might be a situation where you'd want a family member, kind of a co-trustee, as opposed to necessarily dividing the trustee situation.
One of the things that, in my view, sets BOK Financial apart from other trust companies out there is the way you deal with families and the way you deal with people. So maybe talk about that a little bit. What's your guys' approach to, if somebody says, hey, Mike, we want to name you, or at least we want to consider naming you as our, let's say it's a successor trustee role. So we're going to serve as our own trustees as long as we're able. But if we can't, we're looking for somebody to turn it over to. We don't want to put this onto the kids. What does that relationship look like? How does it get started, and how does that look?
Well, and I'm happy to talk to anybody if they're, when they come in and meet with you and you've done a great job of, as clients say, well, I'm considering a corporate trustee. I don't know what that looks like. I'm happy for them to come over and meet with me, and we kind of walk through, here's how this would play out. And we don't, we charge a fee, but we don't charge a fee until we start serving as trustee. So as the clients go ahead and name us as in that successor trustee role, sometimes they're concerned we're going to start charging a fee right then. I wish I could figure out a way to do that, but I can't. Haven't figured that out yet. So we don't charge a fee until we start serving in that capacity. And then I would say, have them come talk to us. We can explain that. And BOK Financial in particular, and I'll give you a quick background of BOK. We're a regional bank. I think we're about a $70 billion bank headquartered in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And our footprint is really Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri, Arkansas, Texas, Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona. And so I tell people that we're a large bank, so we've got resources that all the the big national banks have. We've got asset managers. We've got farm and ranch management. We've got oil and gas management. We can, from an investment side, we can do some unique things with private equity and hedge funds. We can handle special needs trusts. We can handle trusts where there's an outside money manager where we don't manage the money, but we work with an outside money manager. And so we can do all the things that the big trust companies do. But when you call us, I'm going to answer the phone. So you're not going to get sent to a call center. And so I say that we try and outbig the small banks with the tools and things that we have, but we also outsmall the big banks with the customer service that we're going to provide people.
That matters, right? We were trying to make things easy. We don't need bureaucratic red tape and on hold and transferred, and the trustee doesn't even know anything about you and who the family is. So, So you guys review the trust, why the trust makers, if you will, the grantors, trustors, whatever you want to call them, are still alive. Do you have conversations with them so you kind of understand what family dynamics are? And
absolutely, and that's really important from the trustee perspective, is to know what the grantor's intent is, because the documents may say, you can have discretionary distribution for the benefit of my children, but it helps me a ton to have met the grantor, know that, do they want this really just to be, can I be liberal and give this money to them as, for them to just enjoy and do whatever they want with? Or does the grantor say, well, they need to kind of work. I want to make sure they're working and kind of hold this back a little bit as an incentive for them to provide for themselves, and just to kind of have those conversations and get to know what the client really wants in the future. That makes a ton of difference from us. So we'd like to build that relationship with the client as early as we can. Sometimes we don't get that opportunity. We've been named in a document and we find out after they've passed away. But the more that we can deal with the client now, it just works better for everybody in the future.
And I think that's one of the things that sets you guys apart that I like, is that have that, because a lot of trust companies, I think, they don't get paid, as you said, until they take over. And so they want to do as little as possible. But having that, just being able to periodically check in with them, meet, get an understanding of what their goals are, and understand, that the dynamics of the family and about the kids, and so, they made on paper, it says, trustees' discretion can make distributions for Susie and Johnny for their health, education, maintenance, and support, right? But what does that mean? How do you exercise that discretion? But if the parent said, well, if little Susie comes and asks for money, you give it to her. She's good with money. She can manage. Just give her the money if she asks. You're fine to do so. But little Johnny comes and asks for money because he needs to put tires on the car. You better tell him, okay, have the tire shop reach out to us and we'll pay the invoice, because he'll need tires next week, because before he gets to the tire shop, he's going to go spend the money on something else. Or if they have drug or alcohol problems. And so, again, I think that having those conversations and have a trustee that's willing to get to know you a little bit beforehand, before the fees even start, because I've always said, if they can see the value in you, before you even start charging a fee, just imagine what that fee is going to be like.
And that's what I appreciate about you and your attorneys and your system, how you have that conversation with the clients, right? You're not just sticking them in a form document and running them through a trust mill. You sit down with the clients, you get to know what they want, what's best for them, what's best for their family. And then you have that continuing relationship with them as well, to build that so that you know what their goals are, you know what the desires are, and you build that into your documents are customized, and you build the relationship with the client over more than just an initial come in, meet, sign the document, we don't see you again. You build that relationship, and that makes it easier for the family. It makes it easier for the trustee. and it just helps, and it's better for your client.
Right. And we're there at the end, as I tell clients, this is a team sport. And so, after their incapacity or after the death, we're still there, right? And we've had all those years of working with them, and we're able to come alongside you as the trustee and say, okay, it's in, and just working together to make sure that their assets go to who they want, when they want, the way they want, with the least amount of cost, complexity, again, creating clarity over chaos. And it can help. And you guys are doing the heavy lifting, and the kids can go out and just spend the money,
right.
Enjoy the money, and they're not having to do that, and it takes away a lot of the family dynamics. So here's one that I get questions from clients who come in and will ask, well, if a beneficiary, if one of the kids needs money, how do they get the money out? So how do you guys handle distributions to the beneficiaries, and what are some of the different ways that can be done?
Well, of course, that depends on what the terms of the trust say. But, as you indicated, it's typically use it for the beneficiary for their health, education, maintenance, and support. And we hopefully have developed that relationship with the client so they know, hey, if I need something, I call or email Mike and say, I need money, I need new tires, right? Let's use that example. And hopefully we've gotten to know the beneficiary so that we know, okay, we did just buy tires last week, so we're not going to do this again. But typically they'll reach out to me, and our system is for distributions under a certain dollar amount. I kind of have to approve it, and then my manager approves it, and then it's done. If it gets over a certain amount, then we've got another larger group that looks at the situation and they approve it. But it's pretty well streamlined so that we're not waiting. Well, our trust committee meets once a month, so you're going to have to wait for that distribution. We can get that out usually pretty quick. But like anything, it's just a relationship, and knowing if the grantor, would he have wanted this distribution to be made, or would they have not wanted the distribution to be made, and then working with the beneficiary to figure out what we should do best.
All right. So we live in a very mobile society. I think it's one of the reasons that trusts have grown in popularity over the years. One of many reasons they have is they can be valid anywhere, hold assets, anywhere. So you guys can serve as trustees, and if there's property that's in Colorado and they've got beneficiaries that live in Florida, and
we can handle it. I was just in Florida a couple of weeks ago doing an inventory of a house. A man passed away, had a home in Florida, so I had to go to Florida. It was during the big snowstorm here, so poor me. But yeah, we were in Florida inventorying the house. We'll handle that, so we can work nationally with anybody.
Okay, and your local office that you work out of is here in
Overland Park.
Okay.
Yep.
But how do people connect with you? If they wanted to connect up with you, how would they do so?
That's funny. I wasn't prepared to answer that question. But so, you go to BOKFinancial.com, and there's at our website, you can look at in the private wealth area and scroll down, and there'll be a phone number for the Overland Park Private Wealth Office, and you would connect with that. And then I don't know if I should be given my
That's okay, Mike. I got you.
Number or email address. I don't know if you want me to be doing that, but
no, I got you. We're going to put it in the show notes,
okay.
Right? We'll make sure that people can get a hold of you. All right. So as we wrap up here today, if you could leave listeners with just kind of a few final thoughts on choosing a trustee or working with a professional trustee, what would be the takeaways you would want listeners to take away from today's episode?
Well, I think that really the choice of the trustee is one of, if not the most important decisions in preparing your estate plan. And again, I believe the role of a corporate trustee is the family harmony. our job is to make it easier for the family, fulfill the role of the grantor, and if we can do that, everybody's going to be happy.
All right. Well, Mike, thank you for being here today. That went fast as we went in. We packed a lot in there. But as I said, I'm just a big believer in professional trustees for so many people because, as I said, the number one thing here, I don't want to be a burden and I want everybody getting along. And if we don't think this through well, especially if we have a situation where this kid needs some help, they're not good with money, and now you're going to pit one of your other kids, put them in a position to manage them and have to say no, and it's going to be a burden, and it probably didn't go real well with the idea of I want everybody to get along.
Yeah.
So, but there can be so many, even in situations where families get along great, being able to come in and you guys do the work and of the trustee, and then they get to be able to enjoy the fruits of what whether it's mom and dad or whoever the trust makers were. So, Mike, thank you for being here today.
Thanks
we'll
for
have to do
having
this
me.
again at some point. So,
Absolutely.
All right. As we wrap up today, remember, estate planning is not about paperwork. It's about protecting the people you love and making life easier for them when it matters most. Thoughtful planning today can spare your family confusion, conflict, an unnecessary burden tomorrow. Your estate plan, or lack of one, will one day speak for you when you can no longer speak for yourself. It helps determine whether the people you love are protected or burdened, whether grief is softened by clarity or made harder by chaos and confusion. What is left undone today often becomes what families must deal with later. And when the time comes, there's no opportunity to go back and fix it. If today's conversation gave you something to think about, that's a good thing. These are important conversations to have, and they're worth sharing. Thank you for spending this time with us on the Smart Legacy podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and share it with someone you care about. These topics matter, and sharing them helps more families plan well. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and Spotify. You can also visit us at stocktonlaw.com, where you'll find all of our episodes and many other helpful resources. Until next time, plan thoughtfully, take care of the people you love, and Mike, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
The information provided in this podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. Listening to this podcast does not create an attorney-client relationship. Laws vary by state, and this podcast focuses on estate planning and elder law in Kansas and Missouri. If you are located in Kansas or Missouri and require legal advice, please contact our office. Otherwise, consult a qualified attorney licensed in your jurisdiction.